All right guys, today is a big day. We finally have insurance on our boat, which means we can disconnect the dock lines and head out. We're gonna go to a beautiful anchorage here in Trinidad. But before we do that, we have to prep the boat. So we've got to take off some of these covers. We have to disconnect from shore power and we have to disconnect the shore water. And there's a few other things that we need to do before we can leave the dock. So let's get that stuff ready and let's head out on the water. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is remove the sun cover from the helm station. All right, so next, Ashley is going to get the anchor windlass remote control hooked up so it's ready to go. So when we get to our destination, which is not that far, it's about a 45-minute trip to get over there. That way, when we do arrive, we're not scrambling to look for the remote and get it hooked up when we want to drop anchor. You never know what the conditions are going to be like. It should be fairly calm, but just to be sure, we're going to have it ready to go. So right when we pull up, we find our spot, we check the depth, and we start dropping the anchor right away. All right, so next thing we're going to do is disconnect from the shore water line. So we have to disconnect the hose, and then inside of the boat we need to switch a valve over, and then we need to turn on the water pump that's inside the boat, which we turn off when it's hooked up to shore power, because obviously, or shore water, because obviously the water is pressurizing the system from the city. So the water valve is actually behind the seat here. So we'll move this cushion out of the way, and then I can reach in here and turn that valve. All right, that's ready to go. Now head over to the switch panel and turn on the water pump. At the switch panel, I'm also going to turn on the VHF, the autopilot, and the radar. So everything I turned on are these things up here. Now I'm going to remove all of these covers and stow them away. It's extremely hot in here. It is literally like a little greenhouse. So next step is to unzip these panels and roll them up and fasten them out of the way so we get some nice airflow through here. Oh man, that is so much better. Now we got some of that island breeze coming through here, and man, it feels good. All right, so everything's basically ready up here. We haven't started the engines yet. We still have to disconnect from shore power and switch that all over. But before I do that, I just wanted to show you something that is pretty interesting, and you probably know this already, but it's not something you normally think about. But I love my rock form case. Obviously, you guys know from DDE, right? We all have rock form cases, and they're super solid. They're amazing. They keep our phones from breaking. By the way, this is not a rock form ad. They don't pay me anything. But the magnets on here are very strong, and the electronics in a compass and the navigational equipment is very, very sensitive to magnets. So let me show you what happens when I just put my phone close. And it's not even just the case, it's also the phone itself will actually move the compass. So we've got the compass here, and I'll put my phone over here and look at that thing move. And then as I move it around, so yeah, that's just a bit of advice. Make sure that you don't have any magnets near your compass or your navigational devices, because it can throw the readings off a ton. And also, in every single compass, in every boat, depending on where it's mounted, there is some error. And there's also different compass error depending on where you are geographically. So these things have to be taken into consideration when you're navigating by compass. It's actually on the charts that you would do chart plotting with, basically a big road map of the ocean and all the land. But all of these charts have a notification to mariners, and it'll show a compass rose, and it'll say what the deviation is at the time. So you need the most up-to-date charts to be able to navigate correctly, and you also need to take the variation and deviation both into consideration when you are plotting your course and sailing through the ocean. Well, come on in and then close that door, because the next thing we have to do is, unfortunately, we've got to turn off the air conditioning, and then we're going to turn off the switch panel for shore power and switch it over. And then I have to actually go down into the floorboards, into the bilges, and close the inlet water for these air conditioning systems. So basically the AC is cooled by seawater. There's a pump that goes through there. But what happens when you're sailing and you don't close those valves and the AC isn't running, it's not actively pulling water in, then you can get air bubbles, because as the boat is going through the water, it's creating some maybe cavitation possibly, but it's also just the way that the bow is going through the water. The waves are moving up and air is getting caught in there and pulled underneath the hull and into the inlets, and you get those air bubbles in there, and then you go to use the AC later and now you have air bubbles in the system and it won't circulate the water. All right, so we're gonna turn it off now, cycle through here and get it off. Next one, off. All right, so in the floorboard here, I just lifted that up and it's obviously a bit dark, but here we go. So that is our seacock down there for the starboard air conditioning. So I'm gonna shut this valve off. All right, and now for the port side and the salon AC. And we have two valves here. Oh, that one sounds a little bit crusty, which means there's some barnacles starting to grow in there. So sometime soon, I'll have to show you guys how to clean out those valves without actually being out of the water. And remember, that's all below the water line. So it's about probably 1.5 feet below the water line. So if I just took the hose off and opened that up, water would come gushing in. But there's a trick that the previous owner showed me, and I'm gonna show you guys that later on. Today, I'm gonna close it up and we're gonna get out there on the water. All right, so now we're ready to disconnect, turn off shore power. And then when we run the generator, we can turn those on and transfer the power over, but we don't need to do that now. We're just basically running off of the batteries at the moment. All right, Arya, will you disconnect us from shore power, please?
Which one do I do first?
It does not matter, but he said that the one with the red light is better on the right. So as long as you remember that, red light on the right, when we put it back together, we're good to go. So unscrew that black thing right there. There you go.
Oh, okay.
That locks it in place. So that one's got like a big twist, and the other one has like a quarter turn or half turn twist. There you go. And then when you do that, you want to make sure that you close these two so no water gets in there.
Okay.
Okay, so now we need to remove those from the boat, but you need to be very careful with those because we do not want to drop that in the water. That is 240 volts of and a lot of amps. There you go. Bring it over there, and then yeah, set it down.
Like right here?
Yep. All right, so I'm gonna open up the engine compartments before we fire it up and just give them a quick check, make sure everything looks good there, and then we'll fire up the engines, listen to them, and then if that's all good, then we'll close the engine compartments and let the engines warm up. All right, so looking in the engine compartments, everything looks good, clean and dry. Also, I can show you guys the tiller system. So basically, this is connected to the rudder shaft, which is actually brand new, and the bottom is new as well. And they rebuilt the rudder, so all that's fresh, but there is a problem with it. They are off by about 5 degrees, and I'm not sure why yet. The previous owner had them rebuilt and installed, and he noticed that they were off and that the steering was a bit tight. So they actually took the boat out of the water, put it on the hard, they pulled it out, and they re-honed the bearings, and now the steering feels fine, but it's still off 5 degrees. So I'm not sure if that's a linkage adjustment thing or if it's another issue, but I'll have to dive into that a bit more later on. But for now, well, we want to get off the dock and we want to go to this anchorage. And it's not that far away, so we're not going on a long trip where any of this could cause us any real issues. Check in here. Everything looks good in here as well. So it's time to fire these things up. So another tip that the previous owner gave me, which is nearly endless because he gave me a ton of good advice. But that was to fire up the farther away engine first. So that's the port side engine, the left side. We're gonna fire that one up first because if we fire up the starboard side, we're right next to that engine. So all we're gonna hear is that, and we won't be able to hear the other engine. So we'll fire up the port one, which we have the controls for here. So it's gonna make a loud beep, and that is the oil pressure warning alarm. So we're gonna turn it on, and then it's gonna beep until the engine gets running. And that's just a safety thing. That way, if the engine is running and it loses oil pressure, that loud alarm will go off and alert you that there's an oil pressure problem. You need to shut that engine down. So that engine fired right up. Sounds good. I'll give it like 30 seconds. Just make sure everything's good, and then I'll fire up the other side. All right, so that engine is running, and we are ready to fire up the starboard side engine. So get ready for that beep. All right, so that one's fired up. Ashley's just down there taking a peek, making sure there's no leaks or anything weird going on. Give that one about 30 seconds, and then we'll close that compartment. Well, Ashley noticed something on the starboard side, that the sea strainer for the water pump, we weren't getting water movement in there, but it was dumping water over the side. So it looked like the water pump was working correctly, but I just want to double check that before we get going. So we have the sea strainer here, and let me take a look and see if everything is looking good there before we leave the dock. All right, so it's just completely full, which is why we didn't see any water movement. The water's so clear and clean that we didn't see the bubbling like the other side. It just didn't have any air bubbles, but I just turned this valve, and that actually let a couple air bubbles in. So now we should be able to see that circulation. So I'm gonna start that engine up again first, just so we can see the flow of water. And if that all looks good, then we're ready to continue this process.
Looks good.
So another future thing to repair, the tack on this side doesn't work when it's at idle. This side's working, this side is not. The engine is running, obviously, we have oil pressure, but it is not showing any engine RPM. But once we give it a little throttle, then it starts to kick, and then it picks up, and then it works. So we just don't have the idle, but it'd be nice if it was working the whole time. So obviously you guys know me, I'm gonna fix that eventually, start tracking down what the issue is, and I'm sure I'll show you guys what's going on with that as well when we get to that. Okay, so next, inside the boat, we're going to power up the secondary chart plotter, and we're also going to turn on the VHF radio and make sure that's set to channel 16. So channel 16 is basically the distress channel. So that's the station you'd have it on all the time. Every boat can communicate with each other on that channel, just to basically hail another boat. So we could say, hey, name of boat, go to channel 78, or whatever channel you might be using that's a channel made for having a discussion. Channel 16 is for emergencies or hailing, and that's it. So you're not supposed to have conversations on that channel, but you want to keep it on all the time. If someone's in distress, as a fellow boater, you're supposed to go over there and help them. If you're the closest one and you're able to, you're supposed to go over there and help them in whatever type of situation they're having. All right, so this next part is a bit stressful for us because it's the first time we've ever done this by ourselves. So Rio is going to attempt to film, and we'll see what we get out of it. But right now we're gonna disconnect from the dock, and then I need to use the throttles to rotate, kind of drift this catamaran around the corner, kind of like an e-brake turn here, but we don't have any speed. So I gotta throttle up on one side and reverse on the other side to get the boat to rotate. You guys might have seen something like that in those new electric cars that are all-wheel drive, how they can turn on a dime. Well, catamarans can do that too. And I'm gonna attempt to do that right now. All right, we're doing it. We're spinning this thing around.
Can I do this, Papa? It's not getting in the screen.
Good, yep. All right, we made it off the dock. Whew. We've only got about 4 knots of wind, and out there might be some more wind, but where we're going, it's pretty close. So we're just going to use the motors, and I also want to get more used to steering the boat and maneuvering the boat before I throw the sails into the mix, because sails add a whole nother dimension. Now you're worried about what side the sails are on, the sail trim, and tacking. And we'll talk about that a bit more. But right now, I'm gonna focus on where I'm going and make sure I don't run into any of these small boats.
Made it on the dock. But it does look like rain.
right, so we're just heading in now to Scotland Bay. Absolutely beautiful spot. And the good thing is it is a very, very short trip over here from the marina to this bay. So it's really easy to get to. Go over here for a couple nights, have that separation and that completely different feeling being at anchor than it is to being tied to a dock. So as we're pulling in here, I am looking at the chart here, which you guys aren't really gonna be able to see because it looks like it's flashing on the screen, but it has the depths. So in the middle, it's too deep to anchor, but as we go in, it gets shallower. So we're going to find a nice spot in here and figure out what the depth is, and then go probably about 3 to 4 times more chain length than depth. So that's called the scope. So we're gonna have a 1 to 4 scope. For these conditions, that's gonna hold us in place really well. If it was windier or we were expecting storms where there's a lot of swells or something like that, we would let out more chain and go up to like a 5, 6 to 7 to 1 scope. So lots more chain. The chain lays on the ground and helps hold the boat in place. All right, we did it.
We did it.
It's oddly stressful.
Really?
Yeah, especially since it's so new for us. I mean, it's just a completely different experience on a boat this size. We have, like I've said before, we have a small trimaran, and I mean, it's not that small. It's a 31 foot and it's almost 19 feet wide. So it's, you know, it's not like a dinghy. But this boat is huge in comparison.
So many systems.
Yeah.
That you have to remember what to do and in what order.
Yeah, and then, yeah, exactly. Just driving the boat, we've got 2 motors, so we can control the boat and we can pivot it by using the motors. But at the same time, this boat weighs a lot, so it reacts different. This the first boat that I've had that has a steering wheel rather than a tiller. A tiller is just like a bar sticking out of the rudder that you move back and forth, so you have that like direct feel of where the boat goes and how much pressure is on the rudder, and you can adjust your sails depending on that, so you don't have what's called weather helm. So it's basically tracking straight, and you have a very light tiller. That means your mainsail and your jib or Genoa or whatever it might be, your head sail are both adjusted properly. And I know there's a lot of these sailing terms that you guys don't know yet, and we'll get into that and we'll go over them. I don't want to do a sailing class over one video, but we can kind of like throw in bits of knowledge in every video, and that way it's easier to digest and we can talk about it a little bit more. We are here. We made it to Scotland Bay, anchoring for the first time by ourselves ever with this boat, and now it is it's time to enjoy
Debriefing and cocktails.
Debriefing and cocktails and let's enjoy some scenery. Well, we're actually deciding to move because after we got the anchor down and set, we got a little too close to this boat behind us. So we're gonna pull up the anchor and move over a little bit and then drop the anchor so we don't have to worry about being too close to somebody. I think we're probably fine, but it's also kind of annoying. It's kind of open here. There's really no reason for us to be right next to each other when we don't know each other. All right, we moved to our new spot all the way in the back, and it is, well, pretty spectacular. We have kind of this little cove all to ourselves now. The back of the boat is facing this. Pretty cool spot. Now that we've re-anchored and we're in our spot, we need to turn on the anchor light, because when you're at anchor, you need to have a light that's on top of the mast to let other boats know that you're there. Just a visual aid. If they're coming in at night and it's super dark, or if it's foggy or whatever it might be, it gives them an idea of the fact that there's a boat in front of them that they might hit. So let me go turn that on right now. All right, back at the switch panel, anchor light on. It also has the option for a tricolor, which is the navigational lights. So that's on top of the mast also. And there is one on the bow as well. So we have 2 options there. The one on the bow is actually a incandescent, a regular light bulb, and the one on top is an LED. So the LED one is brighter, obviously easier to see, and it's on top of the mast, and with LEDs you're not really worried about them burning out. With a standard bulb, you are. But the reason for having the standard bulb on the front is in case of two things. One is a dismasting. If one of these shrouds breaks and the mast actually comes off and falls into the ocean, you got to cut it away. You got to get rid of that mast and disconnect it from the boat. And if that's the case, then you lose your mast light and you lose your navigation light up at the top. The other reason is if you have a lightning strike, you're going to lose basically all of the electronics on the boat. But with that tricolor light on the front, with that navigation light that has a regular light bulbs, if they burn out, we have spare light bulbs, we can power them up, and we'll still have some sort of lights on the boat to basically comply with navigational rules and also hopefully not get hit by another boat in the night if you do have to run it. All right, Rio, are you ready?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Fishing.
Yeah.
There's lots of little fishies
Maybe
that we should get so we can fish for big fish.
Oh, we want to catch some bait fish?
Yeah.
How about, before we do that, how about we try a lure? We put a lure on this thing and we try casting over here and see if there's any big fishies hanging out.
Okay.
Go.
Let's do this.
Yes! Last night, we did catch one fish, but it was just too dark to film. We need to invest in some better lighting equipment, some video equipment, some audio equipment, and we're gonna do that soon. But that being said, we didn't catch that the footage of that one fish being caught, and it honestly wasn't that impressive anyway. So next time, we'll be able to show you guys. Also, this isn't our first time in Scotland Bay. We actually came here about a week ago, but that was with the previous owner. He brought us over here and kind of did a handover with us so we could kind of learn everything on the boat and really just get more comfortable with everything. And, well, something broke and I owned the boat at that time. That means that it's my responsibility to fix it. I've got it fixed, but I have a little bit of footage of what happened and how I was able to repair it. Here's that footage now. So I just had our first near disaster on the boat and I was trying to put the dinghy up and I broke it. This winch just came flying off of here and literally was in the air. And this thing weighs like 15 pounds. Like it is not light. We're all done over here and we're getting ready to lift it up by the winch, which is like this one right here. But instead of just using the winch handle, I was using the winch that's in the cockpit that's electric, so you don't have to sit there with a hand crank and crank it up. So we have a long piece of line, and it was here and it was just going underneath there and up to where Aria is, up to that electric winch. There's the switch for it right there. So it started coming up, and then I think the winch froze because it's not moving anymore, and the screws just completely pulled out of there. They are ripped out, but they didn't mess up the threads. And I'm looking at the boat over here, and it looks like, you can see that, it's pretty hard to see, but it looks like what Leopard did was just screw that directly in to the fiberglass. There's no metal backing plate there. It's not like a drilled and tapped metal backing plate that's reinforced. It's pretty thick fiberglass, probably 3/4 of an inch, but it was just not sheet metal screws, but machine screws tapped into fiberglass, and it just ripped out. At least it happened here right now, not while we were sailing across somewhere. We're just in this anchorage here in Scotland Bay. All right, so the first thing that I need to do is take this winch apart, because right now it is seized, it's not rotating, but I think that might be because one of the bolts has fallen in and might be blocking the gear, and I have to pull it apart anyway, because to get to these bolts I have to disassemble everything to get that access. Obviously these bolts are trash, they're bent, so I have to pull this thing apart, but I didn't bring a lot of tools, and there aren't a lot of tools on the boat. He did leave me some stuff, some drills and other 110 volt stuff, a couple battery powered tools. I'm going to go through those in a little bit, but right now I need some hand tools, and I brought a bag full of tools, but just kind of random stuff, screwdrivers, wrenches, I brought a couple files, a rivet gun, basic things. Hopefully it's enough to get all the stuff done that I need to get done, and then I can put together a list of other tools that I'm gonna have to bring with me on the next trip and just make sure, obviously, I'm gonna be fixing a lot of things on the boat, and I'm used to having a lot of tools, so things are gonna be a little different on the boat. I'm not gonna have a massive toolbox with a big selection of everything I want, but we'll still get it done. And I think that on top of this winch, it's got these little grooves here, so I think I can just kind of open it up. Pair of pliers maybe, and just get in those grooves. There we go, not too bad. It was a screw that was stuck here in between the gears, and that's why it wasn't turning. So here's what I got from the hardware store. I've got some stainless 6mm bolts, which is the same diameter of what was in there, but obviously a lot longer so they can go all the way through. We got some nuts and some washers. Unfortunately, I don't have my TIG welder with me. Otherwise, I would take those washers and tack weld them to the nuts. Well, I don't have that. So what I'm gonna do is super glue the nuts onto the washers, and then once that's set and it's holding them in place, I'm going to take some marine glue, basically like caulking kind of stuff, but it's really, really strong. And then I'm gonna put those around the nuts and let that dry for a little bit. And then I'm going to put that onto the washer and glue them onto the backside of the fiberglass. But to get to those inside, I'm going to have to drill a hole with a hole saw through there so I have access to put those washer nut backing plates into place. Well, there's definitely no backing plate in there. Super glue, and then I've got the bolt just sticking through there so I can kind of help line it up. Push it down. And that's good to go and centered up. All done. Winch is back on, working as it should. That project has been completed. All right, well, it broke, and that was the first thing on the boat to break, and it was a fairly easy fix. It happened in an anchorage. It was easy to take care of. We came up with a solution. We got the dinghy out of the water, all that. So no big deal. It was cheap, and it's better than it was from the factory. So all good there. But then today we had another issue. We have two paddle boards. One of them was in the water. The other one was inflated and on the deck, and it was sitting in the sun. It probably got overinflated because of the heat, and it was also in the sun, so I think it weakened the glue, and it kind of popped. It burst at the back. So there's a big section of it that's popped open. Now I have to fix that, but that shouldn't be too difficult to fix, but I don't have the glue here on the boat with me to fix it right now. So when we get back, that's another project that I've got to work on. For now, the girls are off at the beach with Ashley on the other paddleboard, having some fun, swinging on some rope swings and going for a swim while I just go through the boat and get used to everything else that this boat has. There's so many systems, and I'm just kind of walking through the boat and looking at everything, pulling the floorboards up and looking at where all the plumbing goes, just so I have a better understanding of how all of this works. We're gonna be out here in Trinidad for another week or so, and we will be filming a lot more videos that are gonna come out on Saturday morning, just like normal. But that being said, you might actually see me back in a DDE video very soon, because when we're done here in Trinidad, we're flying back to Southern California, and I'm back at DDE to work on the F12. We have a lot more to do to that car. It's running great, but it needs some more work. We need to take it out to the track, so stay tuned for DDE videos because that'll be happening very soon. And also, I know you guys have been asking about my AMG. Well, that is also going to be discussed, and it's going to be on DDE. So stay tuned for this channel, ESSA Adventure, Saturday mornings, and also look for me on DDE because I'll be back and I'm there for a while. Also, I'm not only going back to work on stuff for DDE, I also have to figure out what to do with all of our stuff that we have at our house, my other cars. There's a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff we want to bring with us and put on our boat, but we need to figure out the logistics of doing so. That means putting some stuff in suitcases and bringing them with us, but also big items. I mean, we're gonna have to ship stuff here, and then we have to worry about import and duty and taxes and all of this stuff to bring our own stuff we already own, to bring it into another country, to put it onto our new boat that we're going to eventually leave the country with. It's a big, complicated process, and I will show you guys every step of the way. I also have my other boat that's in Southern California. I need to sell that boat. I have a possibly an interested buyer, so crossing my fingers that'll go through, but I'll do another video on that boat so you guys kind of see, you know, what we were sailing before this massive boat that we have now. There's a lot of stuff going on, so don't worry guys, we're still gonna have videos every Saturday. Stay tuned and we'll see you soon.